All right, get out your Kleenex. I've got mine, but you won't need it yet, because first we're going to talk about the Pilgrims. Maybe the week after I've announced my retirement for next August, but it's also Thanksgiving Sunday. I hope you had a good feast. I hope that your conversations with your friends and relatives was at least respectful, and that something about the holiday gave you a break from your worries, if you had them, about our nation. Because gratitude does that. It puts the gift of our lives in perspective. You may remember a bit of the story of Thanksgiving, that as the Pilgrims approached the first anniversary of their November arrival in the New World, their first impulse was to honor that day with a day of mourning. After all, every family had lost at least one member to that first terrible winter, and many families had lost half or more of their members. But somehow another group of pilgrims said, well, of course we must honor our dead, but on the other hand, we've had a lot of good fortune. We found caches of food left by Native Americans. When we met them in the spring, they were helpful and generous. We learned from them how to plant crops here in the New World, and we have had a good harvest. This winter, every family has a cabin against the cold. Our first babies have been born. Yes, we have suffered, but we should honor our first anniversary with a feast of Thanksgiving, which of course they did. Joy and sorrow were, no doubt, woven fine in that gathering. That's one of a number of things we sometimes gloss over in the Thanksgiving stories in years when things are well. The Pilgrims were still grieving terrible losses and were now facing another long, cold winter. We look back on the story with mixed emotions. This wave of immigrants to this land are the ancestors of some of us, and their story a national icon, but all was not hunky-dory. Future relationships with their Native American neighbors are a stain on our history which we have still not found a way to heal. Many uncertainties still awaited the Pilgrims, and their hopes to establish a society governed by their values were soon eclipsed by our spiritual ancestors, the Pilgrims, the Puritans, whose way set New England and the nation on the course which is now history. But for that day, they gave thanks and were strengthened to face what would come. Gratitude does that. It strengthens us. And when Abraham Lincoln revived this holiday of Thanksgiving after the Civil War, the national mood had the same mixed emotions. There was both rejoicing that the war was over and terrible grief for the unprecedented loss of young life on both sides that were the consequences of that war. And there was worry for the future, and that worry became more acute after the assassination of Lincoln and the backlash against progress that followed. The arc of the universe that bends towards justice took an S-curve there. Things were not well at all. And yet we've celebrated a day of gratitude on the fourth Thursday of November ever since. Political uncertainty, danger ahead, losses behind, change in the air. Do you relate? So do I. So let's throw a feast. Let's shake off the stress and the worry and focus on the things that have made us happy and proud. Let's, for the moment, rest in what is. Okay? Gratitude does that. It is possible that the Pilgrims and even the unorthodox President Lincoln were inspired by a verse in the New Testament in which the Apostle Paul writes that we should give thanks in all things. It's kind of an interesting construction, to give thanks in all things, which is different from giving thanks for all things, which could get us into some mighty difficult places. Give thanks for cancer, for the death of children on a school bus, for racist attacks on our neighbors of color. No, let's not go there. But it's not necessary, for our lives are always more than the difficulties, griefs, and miseries that we face. For most of us, during most of the days of our lives, the gift of life itself, no matter the circumstances, is worth our gratitude. And when we are recalled to that, the rest falls away, at least for a while. I see this a lot as I help families in times of grief or visit with people who are very ill or dying. They are so grateful. They're grateful for the visit, grateful for the nurse who comes in to turn off the beepy machine, grateful for those who come to the memorial service, who brought the cookies, who babysat the nieces and nephews, who did all the things that people do. In the midst of their grief, their pain, the losses they endure and face, they are grateful. Not for all things, but in all things. In the totality of all things, they are grateful. And they are better for their gratitude. Social science has proved this over and over. People given the task of writing down 3 things they're grateful for each morning are within weeks noticeably happier, getting more exercise, taking better care of themselves, and enjoying better health than those in a control group. Now, you know, if somebody invented a very expensive medicine that you could take every morning and that would do that much for a person's health with no side effects whatsoever, that company would be rich beyond measure. And we would all be enjoying to add this medicine to our daily lives. But writing in a journal, nobody makes much money that way. But that doesn't mean it's not more effective than many medicines that cost an arm and a leg. So, just do it. There's nothing magical about the journal. Keep notes in your phone if that's how you want to do it. Make a list in your head. Tell your spouse. Whatever works for you. But make a practice of gratitude. How does this work? Well, the magical thing about gratitude is this, that when we're focused on what we're grateful for, we're no longer focused on desiring a different life. Instead, we're focused on making the best of the life that we have. And that starts a cascade of desires to take care of ourselves, to share our blessings, to choose positive rather than negative attitude, and all of those choices help us to feel happier. 3 gratitudes a day. The day after Thanksgiving, I sat with my coffee at the kitchen window and focused on the old sleeping bag I'd tossed across the cold frame. It's a really old sleeping bag. It was my childhood sleeping bag, as a matter of fact. It sheltered me many a night on family camping trips. And then it was my adult picnic blanket. And when it got too scrungy even for that, it became the extra cover on the cold frame. I'm devoted to growing lettuce for Christmas dinner, and that's what it takes. Had the sleeping bag not torn in the wind, I doubt if I would have noticed it at all. If I had not set myself the task of writing down 3 gratitudes, I probably would have only lamented that it needed to be mended or maybe even consigned to the trash. Instead, I spent a few pleasurable minutes remembering family camping trips, and especially the one when we camped next to an evangelical church group bent on converting us. My humanist father could only take so much of that. We don't share your religion, he said, but I'm sure we share gratitude for this beautiful place. It was at Yosemite. And one thing I am grateful for is that in this country we are free to believe differently. They all nodded in polite agreement. Gratitude does that. But this weekend, of course, having spent the last couple of weeks working on the plans and tasks of announcing my retirement, we actually planned to do this earlier, but we were so devastated after the election, we waited as long as we felt we could so that we could all recover. Anyway, this weekend, the focus of my gratitude has been on you, on this church, on looking back at a career which was not always smooth sailing, but which has been wonderful anyway. Maybe even wonderful because of those weathered storms. You know, when I came here in 1988, How many people weren't even born in 1988? When I came here, I knew this might be quite a short ministry. I was this congregation's sixth minister, and it's nearly 40 years. And while there were many stories about those ministers and their relationships with the congregation, they pretty much boiled down to ministers abandon us. The UUA staff person who told me his side of the church's history, sad story after sad story, mostly about ministerial misses and malfeasance, finally said to me, "I can tell you've decided to go, but do you understand what all this means?" "Yes," I said. "It means it will be a while before they trust me or follow my leadership." And he got this surprised look on his face and said, "Well, if you understand that, then I think you ought to go. I think you could do them some good." Years later, when telling my colleagues this story, it occurred to me for the first time to ask myself what he thought I meant by a while. Because I had meant 3 years or so, and in the end, it was 15. There was a point at the 3-year mark when I wondered if I should go. We'd had a pretty big fight by then, and a group had split off to form the Albuquerque Fellowship by then. But the congregation had also grown, and the majority seemed to want me to stay, and it seemed that it would be good for the congregation to get over its long-standing, let's reject the minister before the minister rejects us. So I didn't. I'd come to care about this church, and it seemed that what it needed in its sixth minister was to stick around, be trustworthy, build a solid relationship, and prove to its people that ministers could be counted on not to abandon churches at the first provocation or to fall prey to the hazards of stress. Anyway, William and I had come to love the West and New Mexico and Albuquerque and here and you. I decided to stay, and the congregation decided to take the risk of bonding a little closer, giving me a little more authority, and going on. I am so grateful, not for the fights or the anguish or the fear of failure, not for all things, but for the whole of it, in all things. It was a good decision, and as a matter of fact, I made it 2 times again during that first 15 years, and so did the congregation, and the result was this good relationship, this robust health, and the growth and the capacity for service that this vibrant congregation now has. I am so grateful. I'm not only grateful in all things. At this point, I'm grateful for all things. Well, almost all things. Because the fights and the anguish and the fears, they taught me what I needed to know. They forced me to reach out for help. They strengthened my own inner resources. They made me who I am. Thank you. I am grateful for you, the people of this congregation, and the ones who came before you, and not just in my 28 years, but in the 40 years before that. A people who built an institution devoted to the practice and teaching of a liberal approach to religion, open to all, emphasizing not only the creation of community here, but the betterment of community around here. It was a sturdy, dedicated bunch of lay people who started this congregation. And because of them, besides that, let's reject her before she rejects us business, there was a bedrock of focus on a mission for the congregation, on its health and the well-being of its people. That was in the bricks from the beginning, and it asserted itself over and over again through the years when times were really difficult, when a popular minister left after only 3 years to take a prestigious pulpit in the early 60s, when it was so hard to raise money that the board had to decide which bills to pay that month. Right, Jerry? Who was president in the early 70s. When a longtime minister so succumbed to alcoholism that he had to be fired a few years later. When the new young woman minister, who's going to leave us just like the rest of them did, insisted on asking more of the beloved, has stuck with us through thick and thin music director than that music director was willing to give. When those things threatened to go nuclear, some other force always arose. This church is important to us and to the community. We'll do what we need to do to keep the doors open now and in the future. Oh, how grateful I am for that impulse, and I know you are too. The change we all face now, with the ending of a long-term ministry, the need for the congregation to choose its next senior minister, it's a change, not a crisis. We've all known it was coming. You've been counting the gray hairs. I know you have. Plans have been made, but more than that, a foundation that was laid 67 years ago and built on considerably during the last 28. That foundation is strong, and it supports people who are sturdy and willing and generous and faithful. And I am grateful in all things and in this.
Good morning. I'm Larry Ollie, and I picked a really bad day to lose my name tag. But I'm the guy with the white shirt and the stripes. I just wanted to say a little bit about our next steps from the point of view of the Board of Directors. We've been thinking about and learning about minister transition processes for about a year, actually, in the board. And we have a small ministerial transition team. And they've been researching the best practices for minister transition and developing the process that we will follow. Our commitment is an open and transparent process for the work. So we're consulting with the Unitarian Universalist Association, the UUA, and another congregation actually who has some recent transition experience. And this team consists of last year's president, Martha Cattell, our current vice president, Gwen Sawyer, Steve Phillips, and another board member, Chris Mayo. And the four of them are going to present the process in a couple of town hall meetings. The first of those will be right after today's service across the courtyard in the Memorial Hall. As I announced in our annual meeting last January, one of the UUA guidelines is to consider any internal candidate first before going to an external search, and we intend to do that, follow that process. But the first step is really for the congregation and for a search committee to be formed to really define our principles and strengths and weaknesses and vision moving forward. And then the candidate would come forward with their vision and qualifications, and we would see if there's a match. So that's kind of the process at a high level. And I will be heading over to the town hall meeting here when we're finished. We encourage you to go. If you did not receive the letter yet that went out from the board and from Christine, we have copies of that letter over there. We also have some question and answers, some Q&As. And so if you're not able to stay at the town hall, you're certainly invited to come by and pick up those materials. There will be a second town hall after today's second service, so at noon. And then next weekend, we'll do the town halls again. We'll do one after first service and another after second. So we're trying to give you plenty of chances to see what the process looks like and then decide how you'd like to participate. Perhaps you'd like to apply for the search committee. And if not, then the search committee will have a number of events in which they'll ask for your input. So you can learn more about that at the town hall meetings. And with that, I wish you a good morning, and we'll see you at the town hall. Thank you.
Closing hymn this morning is number 128, For All That Is Our Life. Please stand as you are able. The promise of the ages and the faiths of all the world's peoples is simple and full, that those who take up the invitation of life to continuing growth and transformation will not be disappointed, but will find meaning and joy in all the seasons of their lives. So go now in peace, and may the Spirit be with you this holiday and throughout the year. Amen.